Blurring the zones further, let's think about voiceover narration, right? Voiceover can be on the spectrum from diegetic to non-diegetic, and it can actually kind of float in between them. So I'll give you a very simple example of what would be a non-diegetic narrator.
No one would have believed in the early years of the 21st century that our world was being watched by intelligences greater than our own. That as men busied themselves about their various concerns, they observed and studied.
How do I know that the voice narrating is non-diegetic? In a way, I actually don't know until you've watched most of the film, right? The reason I know it's non-diegetic, because we hear Morgan Freeman's voice, is that it never becomes the case that Morgan Freeman is a character in the film, right? If he were a character in the film and say he was a radio host and these words that he was uttering was the recording of his radio, then it would be a diegetic voiceover, if only it was revealed to be that way. If it wasn't, and as this film is, it is not at all, it's non-diegetic, right? So you can see how things can change. Let's look at something that's a little bit more complex. Here's the opening of Sunset Boulevard, which plays a particular trick on our expectations about non-diegetic versus diegetic voiceover narration.
Yes, this is Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles, California. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. That's the homicide squad, complete with detectives and newspapermen. A murder has been reported from one of those great big houses in the 10,000 block. You'll read about it in the late editions, I'm sure. You'll get it over your radio and see it on television. Because an old-time star is involved, one of the biggest. But before you hear it all distorted and blown out of proportion, before those Hollywood columnists get their hands on it, maybe you'd like to hear the facts, the whole truth. If so, you've come to the right party. You see, the body of a young man was found floating in the pool of her mansion, with 2 shots in his back and 1 in his stomach. Nobody important, really. Just a movie writer with a couple of B pictures to his credit. The poor dope. He always wanted a pool. Well, in the end, he got himself a pool. Only the price turned out to be a little high.
So let's just piece together the information we have thus far. We have a narrator who seems to know a lot about the story we're going to tell. He is referring to all the events, including this main person, in the third person. So it would suggest to us that either he's in the world of the film as a diegetic kind of viewer, or he's a non-diegetic narrator who is merely someone who has the privilege of seeing all these events without having an actual embodied presence in the world of the film. That's all we know so far. But watch what changes as we get more information.
Let's go back about 6 months and find the day when it all started. I was living in an apartment house above Franklin and Ivar.
Now something has changed. He has used the pronoun I, suggesting that he is in fact part of this world, and he's going to be take a role in the story that he's going to tell, thereby rendering him definitely diegetic. And there's even more that you're going to learn.
Things were tough at the moment. I hadn't worked in a studio for a long time. So I sat there grinding out original stories, 2 a week. Only I seemed to have lost my touch. Maybe they weren't original enough. Maybe they were too original. All I know is they didn't sell.
Okay. Now I hope that you will notice that this particular person is the same man that we saw floating dead in the pool, which makes things very confusing when you think about diegetic versus non-diegetic. Because, indeed, this is the main character of the film giving their narration from beyond the grave. So is he diegetic or non-diegetic? I don't actually know. Those terms start to become difficult, but merely bringing those terms into a discussion can help us understand the complexity of what this film is trying to do, right? We are jumping back and forth between these two things, even if we don't actually know those terms, in trying to grapple with, say, the question of who is telling the story of Sunset Boulevard. Okay, we can also think about non-diegetic versus diegetic in a slightly different way with respect to this question of how closely aligned are the, say, thoughts of a character narrated with respect to what we're seeing. This is Memento. Pay attention to the status of the voiceover narration.
Stay focused. Find a pen. I gotta write this down. Gotta write it down. Concentrate, concentrate, concentrate. Keep it in mind, keep it in mind, keep it in mind. Come on, I gotta find a pen, I gotta find a pen. I gotta write this down, write this down. Exactly what happened, I gotta write down exactly what happened. Come on, come on, come on.
So Memento, as you might know, is a film about a man who has short-term memory loss. And we get a very privileged access to his point of view through this kind of moment-by-moment, play-by-play voiceover that happens in real time. Notice there's a very big difference between the way this voiceover plays with respect to the previous instances, right? In which we got a kind of voiceover that was telling the story writ large. Here, the narrator is very much attached to the real-life embodied existence of the character. It is happening to the character in the world. The only reason that it's not quite diegetic is because there is no way in which, if I were in the world of the film, I would have access to the audible thoughts of a person in this manner.